4 people die at the end of Othello, and if you trace the chain of cause and effect backward, every single death leads to the same object, a small white handkerchief with strawberry stitched on it. Not a sword, not poison, not a forged letter, a piece of cloth. Shakespeare wrote a tragedy where the entire machinery of destruction runs on something you could lose in a laundry basket. And that's not a flaw in the plot. It's the whole point. Today I want to show you how this handkerchief actually works, why Shakespeare chose something so small, why Othello believes a scrap of fabric over his own wife's voice, and why the play keeps insisting that jealousy doesn't need evidence. It just needs an object to haunt. Because once you see what the handkerchief really is, the tragedy gets so much darker. So let's start with what the handkerchief actually is. It's Othello's first gift to Desdemona, the very first token of their love. And when Othello finally describes it, he doesn't say, "My mother owned it." He builds a legend. He claims an Egyptian enchantress gave it to his mother, that an ancient Sibyl sewed it in prophetic fury, that the dye itself came from embalmed maidens' hearts. As long as his mother kept it, he says, his father would love her, lose it, and that love would curdle into loathing. Now pause on that. Othello isn't describing a keepsake. He's describing a magic spell, an object with the power to hold love together or let it dissolve. The moment he tells Desdemona this story, the handkerchief stops being cloth. It becomes a test. And Desdemona has already failed it, because the handkerchief is already gone. Here's a detail most people miss, and it changes everything. Othello tells that magical origin story in Act 3, while he's interrogating Desdemona. But in the final act, standing in the wreckage of his life, he mentions the handkerchief again. And now it's simply an antique token his father gave his mother. No enchantress, no Sibyl, no prophecy, just an ordinary heirloom. So which story is true? Scholars have argued about this for centuries, but I think the contradiction itself is the answer. Othello invents the magic at the moment he needs the handkerchief to be magical, when he needs Desdemona's carelessness to be a cosmic betrayal instead of an accident. He isn't reporting the object's history, he's writing it live mid-scene. And that's the play's quiet thesis. Objects don't carry meaning. We inject meaning into them, precisely when we need to justify what we already feel. Now watch how the handkerchief actually gets lost, because Shakespeare stages it with brutal irony. Desdemona isn't being careless, and she certainly isn't being unfaithful. Othello complains of a headache, and she reaches up to bind his forehead with the handkerchief. She's using her love token to soothe him. He pushes it away, saying it's too small, and the cloth falls. Neither of them notices, because she's focused entirely on him. Think about that. The object that supposedly guarantees their love fails at its one practical job, comforting Othello at the exact moment Desdemona is at her most devoted. Then Emilia picks it up, not out of malice, but because her husband Iago has begged her 100 times to steal it. She doesn't even know why he wants it. Nobody in this play fully understands the object they're passing around. It just moves, hand to hand, gathering meaning like a storm gathers pressure. Iago's plan is often called brilliant, but notice what he doesn't do. He doesn't forge letters. He doesn't hire false witnesses. He barely constructs any evidence at all. When Othello demands ocular proof, visible proof, of Desdemona's affair, Iago offers a rumor about the handkerchief. He says he saw Cassio wipe his beard with it. That's it. That's the entire case. And Iago tells us exactly why this works. Trifles light as air, he says, are to the jealous as strong as proofs of Holy Writ, as strong as Scripture. He understands that a jealous mind isn't a courtroom weighing evidence. It's a furnace looking for fuel, and anything will burn. The genius of the handkerchief, from Iago's perspective, is precisely that it proves nothing, because a jealous man will do the proving himself. Iago just hands over the object and lets Othello's imagination write the confession. Now, the strawberries. Why did Shakespeare specify strawberries, red embroidery on white cloth? Because that image echoes something else in the play, the wedding sheets. In Shakespeare's time, blood-spotted sheets were the traditional proof of a bride's virginity on the wedding night, red on white. So Desdemona is carrying around, tucked in her sleeve, a miniature of her own marriage bed, a portable emblem of her chastity and her wedding vows. Which means that when Othello imagines the handkerchief in Cassio's hands, he isn't just picturing a stolen gift, he's picturing his marriage bed in another man's hands. That's why this object detonates so violently in his mind. And Shakespeare closes the loop with terrible precision. Desdemona, sensing that death is coming, asks Emilia to put her wedding sheets on the bed. She dies on them. The symbol and the thing it symbolized finally collapse into one. There's a subplot with the handkerchief that seems almost comic until you see what it's doing. Cassio finds the cloth in his room where Iago planted it, and he simply likes the embroidery. So he gives it to Bianca, a woman who loves him, and asks her to copy the pattern. Bianca immediately flares up with jealousy. This is some other woman's token, she insists. Sound familiar? The handkerchief triggers the exact same disease in miniature, in a completely different relationship. Everyone who touches this cloth starts reading it, and everyone reads it wrong. For Othello, it's proof of betrayal. For Cassio, it's a pretty pattern. For Bianca, it's a rival's love gift. For Iago, it's pure ammunition. Same threads, same strawberries. 4 incompatible meanings. Shakespeare is running a controlled experiment right in front of us. The object never changes. Only the need of the person holding it does. But here's the deeper question. Why does Othello trust a piece of cloth over the living, breathing woman standing in front of him? I think the answer lies in who Othello is. He's an outsider in Venice. A black man, a foreigner, a convert, valued for his military brilliance but never fully allowed to belong. Everything he has, he holds through tokens. His rank, his reputation, his marriage. He has no old family network in Venice, no roots in its soil. What he has is portable proof of his worth. So when Desdemona loses the handkerchief, his mother's legacy, his one inheritance from home, it confirms his most private terror, that nothing he holds is truly his, that everything given to him can be taken back. Iago never has to convince Othello that Desdemona is unfaithful. He only has to awaken Othello's buried suspicion that a man like him was never really allowed to keep her. The tragedy ends with the object finally being explained, and the explanation is devastating because of how small it is. Emilia, discovering what her husband has done, tells the truth in front of everyone. She found the handkerchief on the floor, and she gave it to Iago because he asked. That's the entire mystery. No affair, no theft, no sorcery. A dropped cloth and a small marital favor. Telling that truth costs Emilia her life. Iago stabs her for it. And Othello has to stand there and absorb the fact that the proof that unmade his entire world had an explanation 2 sentences long. This is where Shakespeare is most merciless. He refuses to let the handkerchief stay ambiguous. He shows us its full, banal biography, so we understand the horror completely. Nothing supernatural happened here. A man was handed a trifle, and he built a universe of guilt around it. So what is the handkerchief, finally? It isn't a symbol of love or fidelity or magic. It's a symbol of how symbols work. It's a blank white screen, and every character projects their own story onto it. Devotion, suspicion, desire, revenge. Shakespeare understood something that psychology would take centuries to formalize. Jealousy is not a response to evidence. It's a story in search of a prop. Othello never needed the handkerchief to be convinced. He needed it so that his conviction would have somewhere to live. And that's the warning this play hands us across 400 years. When you catch yourself staring at one small thing, a text message, a glance, a scrap of cloth, and it suddenly seems to prove everything, be careful. The object may be light as air. It's your fear that gives it weight. Trifles don't destroy us. What we pour into them does. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If this gave you a new way to see the story, subscribe to Between the Chapters. A new literary deep dive lands every week, and I'd love to have you along for the next one.